Over the years, we've had a lot of isekais, both good, bad, and then we have this type of crap rotting in the darkest corner of my watch list. We've had sequels to masterpieces and things that shouldn't have gotten sequels in the first place. But there is one thing we have yet to get, something that over the years has been forgotten and left to time itself, and that is
a goddamn cheap Rory figurine, cause why on earth are they this expensive like my wallet can't take it anymore?
But what we all really want is a continuation to the glorious isekai that is Gate, or at the very least, want to know what happened to Gate. It was one of those isekais I had watched when I had very little anime left on my watch list since I ended up clearing the whole anime catalog in just 3 years. Don't mean to brag or anything. Damn, I really do have no life. But even then, I thought myself stupid for overlooking this isekai for so long. Not only was the concept of it new and intriguing, but the world building and everything about it was on a completely different level from pretty much everything around that time. Everything about it was completely unique and different. But before we go into anything else, let's talk about what the general premise of Gate was. One day in the heart of Tokyo, a giant gate appears out of nowhere and outpours a bunch of knights, dragons, and fantasy fodder. And naturally, they decide to wreak havoc because why not? But Japan isn't having any of that medieval bullshit, so what do? They send in the big guns. No, like literally, they fought back the American way. Because who needs swords and sorcery when you've got freedom and democracy? Hehe. Proud of that one. Then enters our main protagonist, Itami Yuji, a 30-year-old military guy who just wants to live his life as a weeb civil servant just like we all do. But unfortunately, or fortunately depending on how you look at it, he ended up getting dragged into everything and was one of the reasons why the JSDF won so easily. After the end of the First Army's defeat, Japan decides to go there, and as you'd expect, they're hungry for some resources. So Itami got put on a team and had to go and find out as much about that other world as possible. Then Itami goes around fighting fantasy creatures, soloing dragons, saving elves, then proceeded to bag himself any man's dream. The sadistic demigod priestess baddie everyone knows as Rory Mercury. Well, not as if he needs it since he had a whole ass ex-wife. Well, at least he broke the stereotype that weebs don't have girlfriends. Or wives. Now, skipping over quite a bit, eventually the tension between the countries of this new world grow pretty high because of the threat of the Japanese, which causes a huge shift in the power balance, which gives the Japanese army the chance they need to make a peace treaty. Now, if I went into any more details, I'd pretty much be spoiling 90% of the series, so let's just leave off there. There's so much to love about Gate, which is why I don't understand why we haven't got any news regarding it. Cause when you look at it, Gate isn't really like any other isekai. I mean, yeah, it has the same general principle, but in its core, it's something pretty unique. For example, unlike typical isekai, instead of the MC being transported or reborn into a new world, the world comes to the character. And you'd think that doing something this small wouldn't really have much of an impact on how good of a story it could be. But in the end, it did. It was refreshing, exciting, and to this day has been one of my favorite premises ever in any isekai. This small change that they made paved the way for a completely different type of world building, politics, comedy, and anything else you could really think of. First off, the whole idea of the modern military going up against a fantasy world isn't just a pretty accurate showing of what would happen in the real world, but it also sounds and was really entertaining. And I know people don't necessarily watch anime, especially isekais, to get a real example of what would happen in the world, but Gate does it so perfectly that it really doesn't even matter. Seeing a bunch of guys with guns running at dragons and elves who have magic that's strong enough to end whole civilizations and actually winning is some of the funniest things I've ever seen. It pretty much tackles any questions you've ever had that probably sound like what would happen if you just pulled a blicky on them, since ain't no way they can outrun a bullet. Now, we have seen other isekais try and do something similar, like with Arukoreta and whatever the name of this thing was, but not only was it not on the same scale, but Gate just did it way better overall. The way both cultures were integrated into this one series and it flowed that well isn't something I've really seen at all. Like when Itami brought the girls to Shinjuku, and whenever he's in the other world, you can't really get bored. It's constantly giving you a new experience that you probably wouldn't have gotten if you had went with the traditional isekai. And when it comes to the wars, they're not only entertaining but really well thought out. Especially the first one the JSDF had when they got into the new world. The strategies they use are not only incredibly smart, but also goes to show how much of a difference there is between the military might of both our world and the fantasy one. And plus, Gate isn't structured in the same way as others, since unlike many isekai where the protagonist gains incredible power or embarks in some type of quest to save the world from a demon lord, Gate is more about a slow integration of the fantasy world into the modern world and vice versa. There's no singular big bad to defeat or any demon lord that needs to be killed, and while Itami is a protagonist, he's not on a traditional hero's journey. He's not even a hero to begin with. His story is more about survival, leadership, and doing his job and having fun, which makes it more grounded and less wish fulfillment focused than many other isekais. And yeah, it could be seen as boring since he doesn't really have much special about him, but for some reason, it isn't. Since when you look at him, he's just the protagonist because there needs to be a protagonist. I'd never thought I'd enjoy a protagonist like him ever. I mean, when you think of it, this 30-year-old army guy who doesn't really have anything about him that stands out, or doesn't even have any powers, doesn't really sound like the type of protagonist I'd enjoy. Since there was nothing unique about him in a world where everything else is unique, it just seemed like he would be outshined by both the side characters and the world itself. Not to mention, we've already had characters like him like Subaru and Kazuma, so there couldn't really be that much different from just this one old guy. But honestly, I think that's what made the difference. Now, I don't know if I'm talking out of my ass here or not, but maybe the fact that his character was written older makes him seem way more real, down to earth, and enjoyable. Seeing a bunch of teens running around in a world they know nothing about and just beating a bunch of monsters, while it is fun, it could get repetitive and sometimes you just need a refresh. And the main reason I'm saying this is because cooking life in another world had the same effect on me. When you look at it, the only thing that really changed about this guy's everyday life would really be the fact that he cooks for his dog, and the fact that he's a bit older than your traditional isekai protagonist. But for some reason, the story was incredibly entertaining. So the only thing I could really link to it was the fact that both characters are a bit older than your traditional isekai protagonist. Like I said, I could be wrong, but it could make sense. So going back to Itami, in a world of giant monsters and nations of military forces going up against each other, he doesn't take up more than he can handle, and he doesn't have a hero complex. Though I doubt you can call fighting a dragon with an AR very realistic. I don't really know how else to explain it, but there's just something about Itami that just screams relatable in every single way. He's just a chill guy in the military who wants to enjoy his life of being a weeb, and honestly, like I said before, it's pretty refreshing. He's not as funny as Kazuma, and he's not as resourceful as Subaru, but he's entertaining to watch and bounces well off the side characters. And man, the side characters and waifu lineup in Gate is peak. You've got the whole spectrum. You've got Rory, the fan favorite goth priestess with a battle axe and enough attitude to fill a stadium, and for some reason is incredibly sadistic, but hey, I don't mind. Then there's Lele, the genius mage with a brain to match her looks, Tuka, the adorable elf with a tragic backstory, and Yao, the devoted dark elf who's as loyal as she is deadly, bounce off of Itami's character pretty well. They're not just there for fan service, though I can't say the same thing for Rory, but each of the characters brings a unique element to the story. Rory's curiosity, wildness, and chaotic energy bounces perfectly off of Itami's calm demeanor. Lele's smart and curious side pushes the boundaries of cross-world diplomacy. Tuka's struggles are genuinely heartfelt, adding depth to the fantasy drama, and together they make the world feel way more alive. Not to mention, they actually have personalities and not just tropes. Like, I can't stress this enough, it's like most isekais just copy and paste what's supposed to be a good example of a waifu and just drain them of all personality and make them boring. But Gate is one of those isekais that managed to make me a bit more interested in the side characters than the main character, which is probably why when you put them together with the premise of the story, then pair them with some decent world building, then obviously it would turn out to be a masterpiece. And if there's one thing Gate nails, it's the world building. We're not just plopped into both a medieval fantasy world and just your classic Japan. We're watching two entirely different societies clash, negotiate, and adapt. Japan's government, private companies, and even other nations starting to get interested in the resources and potential alliances on the other side of the gate. All of this actually leads to genuine political tension. The diplomacy, resource hunting, and cultural exchanges are handled exactly like you'd expect, and that realism makes the show feel grounded even when you're looking at dragons flying over your head. It's not just Japan goes in and takes over, the locals have their own power struggles and agendas. It all creates a believable and engaging world. Each encounter is more than just action, it's a reminder that this new world isn't a blank canvas for Japan to control, which is why Itami has to be so careful in everything he does. It's a place with history, factions, and its own drama, and Itami is just one player in this massive political chess game. Compare this to most other isekais where the world basically bends to the MC's will. Gate doesn't spoon-feed their power and influence to its characters. Instead, it explores how different nations would realistically react to each other's presence, which is way more immersive than the usual hero saves the day setup. Now, when you look at it, everything about Gate was supposed to make it one of the best isekais out there and talked about a lot in the community. Now, I haven't read any of the source material for it, but from what I can see, it's mostly impossible to mess it up. It has all the criteria to be one of the best isekais out there. I mean, it still is, but it could be way more popular and better. So what happened? Why did something this good not get a third season when something like In Another World with My Smartphone got its own continuation? Well, that's because it ended. From what I could find, it seems like they ended the anime completely differently from the source material and manga and gave it an anime original ending, which I can't say I'm mad about since, like I said, I haven't read the source material and I didn't mind the way the anime ended, but it is kind of sad to know that something that good just ended like that so quickly. I barely got any time to enjoy it and found myself wanting to watch more and more, and the fact that there's no more is kind of sad. Hopefully in the future we get something else released from it, like a movie or even a couple of episodes, or maybe even something similar to it that could be running longer. But yeah, that's all I've got for you today. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Follow me on Twitter, and I'll see you guys next week. Maybe.